This is Rich Ventura from Sony Professional Display Solutions, and welcome to another episode of RVonAV. We're excited. This is the end of the year. It's amazing to think how fast this year has gone. It feels like just yesterday we were talking about what are we going to see in 23? And I guarantee you we got 95% of it wrong. Way too many things changed this year. And I'm excited today. We've got a whole new panel. Hopefully, they get things maybe a little better, get it correctly when we talk about 24. But we've got a great panel today of just some great industry experts, and I want to bring them on board here. And not only great experts, they're also great friends of Sony and myself. And do real quick introductions of everyone across the board. I'm going to start with Eric Snider from CTI. Eric, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rich. A little bit about myself. I'm the CTO for CTI. We're a pretty large integrator that's held privately here in the United States. But I also work in conjunction with about 100 and other 10 companies from around the world. So doing that global work and everything's opened my eyes, and I get a little bit of a global perspective on some of the topics that I get to look at. So very interesting on not just what's happening in North America, but globally right now.
Cool. And, we're definitely going to be tapping into a lot of that conversation as we go through this. Next, I'm going to welcome John Marshall from our friends over at Userful, one of our recent alliance partners. John, welcome on board.
Thank you. I'm John Marshall. I'm the president and CEO of Userful. For those of you who've not heard of us, we're the makers of the Infinity AV over IP platform, which provides a single software-defined tool enabling enterprises to bring together a whole range of your AV application needs, have them met on a single software platform, whether that be cloud-driven or on-prem. We work with a lot of different integrators. We are very excited to be working with Sony on a new solution architecture. So thank you.
Thanks, John. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Keith Yandell from AVI Systems. Keith, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Keith Yandell, AVI Systems. We're a global systems integrator as well. Myself, been in the industry about 25 years, and really excited to talk technology today.
Well, cool. So let's jump into it. Part of what I want to do as we start this off is really look at these past 11 and a half, almost 12 months, right? This past year. And I know we were chatting about some of the shows and things that we're seeing and stuff like that. Starting with you, Eric, what are those probably 2 or 3 really key applications you saw this last year that have really got a lot of steam going?
Yeah, it's really, you hear a lot in the news and you hear a lot of noise around it, but it's return to office, right? Return to office. The return to office really died last year. It's not a return to office. We are utilizing the office, but the problem is with all the noise, all the clickbait out there, it got interpreted as full 5 days a week office, right? Instead of the hybrid, right? So what ended up happening is full remote work kind of died off a little bit, and full return to office died off. So we're in this new area where we're going to have people within the enterprise spaces going on right now. The problem is that if you walk through the office on Monday, you're only at about a 50% or 40%, fill in the United States. As you hit Wednesday and Thursday, it's higher. So as all the companies were trying to decide or trying to figure this out with the real estate, that provided a lot of strange new marketing and new verticals that kind of happened in that space for the year, right? I hate the term magnet. I think magnet's a stupid idea. It's really just work, but it's being able to work from everywhere, if that makes sense. Or how do I allow my employees to work or accomplish this, because my building was not designed for that. So there's a whole bunch of digital signage, a whole bunch of UC applications, tons of TI. And one other really unique thing that's happening is you hear about all the real estate market crumbling. But yet in New York, San Francisco, and the other real estate markets, grade A real estate actually went up this year instead of going down. So it's the B and C's that are going away, right? So in the enterprise segment, man, there's a lot going on, and really, just you're going to have to be really close to your clients. I'm not sure about new starts, but TI, tenant improvements, I think, has kind of ruled the day in that market this year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a single conversation any of us has where we don't talk about our return to office and what that really means and how we're doing it, not only for our customers, but even us internally. I think that it's definitely a conversation we're constantly having. John, I think you and I have some really great conversations. We talk about the trends, and I think you bring a little bit of a different vantage point than we're used to hearing in our space. What are you seeing from trends?
Yeah, I think we tend to look at things, first and foremost through that macro economic lens, and then drilling down. We're seeing more and more that the economy is guiding a push towards, encouraging companies to run efficiently, running, operationally streamlined. And that has a couple of different impacts. The first one is, there's a lot more budgetary pressure. So decision making has to be, really prudent. And so, whether it be an AV purchase or an IT purchase, there's a lot more scrutiny. And when you can correlate the economics or the ROI of a decision with the fundamental value to the business, those are the budgetary requests that get approved in the enterprise space, at least. And so what we've found increasingly is that the challenge of deploying meaningful operations-driven solutions is taking center stage. Yet while they're being, asked for, approved, they still have to be managed. And whether it be the headcount in the AV department, the headcount in the IT department, it's getting lighter and lighter. So there's a real challenge for enterprises deploying meaningful solutions, but managing them. So that concept of better distributed operations that are managed centrally by AV/IT is getting harder and harder and harder. So the things that we saw from an application perspective and that we think will continue to blossom are operational signage, right? And central management through control rooms. We're seeing more and more of that business area thriving, but it's really the interconnect between the two, right? A centralized operation center that can monitor the activities of a distributed organization in parallel with distributed data metrics and the like, ERP tools and the like that reach to every corner of the business to drive operations.
All right. So Keith, you agree with everything? You kind of see anything else that's happened this last year?
Well, it's been interesting because to Eric's point, we're seeing about a 50% call it return, but it doesn't seem to have slowed investment down at all. The level of global investment, global refreshes these large enterprises are undertaking is incredible. It's been a great year for us. So I think it kind of depends on maybe where you get your news from, so to speak, in some aspects, but the investment is absolutely still there. And that's also driven by a lot of innovation from the collaboration platforms. So the things that are taking place with Teams and with Zoom, there's all these new features coming out all the time because they recognize the workplace, I guess, is still competing with the home. And so there's a lot of innovation, a lot of refresh that's driving, kind of a response to that.
Okay. Yeah, taking a step back, one of the things that I know in our conversation I've had with all three of you over time and, different times and everything like that, data seems to become like more important than it's ever been this last year. And I don't know if it's just because of we've got CFOs behind us saying you got to justify every penny going out the door, or are we really utilizing data as a different currency to really, develop even bigger platforms and bigger things? And, I think signage, we've always talked about the importance of data and signage, but I think there's much more that data is driving around this. And I know, Eric, I've seen a lot of the presentations that you give and stuff like that. I know data is a big key component of it. I mean, what are you seeing, or how are you seeing companies use that data?
Well, the problem is data without insight is useless, right? So I could go out there and tell you right now, what the news is reporting, right? We're 50% occupied in our office spaces across the U.S. And the CFOs respond with, "Well, I'm going to reduce my footprint." But if you don't have the insight on it and know that, hey, if you tell everyone you got to come in 3 days a week, well, what 2 days do you think they're going to take off? Monday and Friday, right? Of course. So the problem is that, that data alone, just in this example of 50% across the board, I can cut my real estate in half by 50 and move on. You can't, because you got 75% of your people maybe coming in on Wednesday, right?
Mhm.
So good data, right? Good data is what's needed out there. And the closer you get to the person using the technology and collecting that data is better, right? Does that make sense? So
Mhm.
we've had broad systems in the past that collect data on maybe at a very upper level, but more specifically, boy, you can really help a company out in their planning. I'm going, you know what? How many times can I reuse a desk, for example, right? I thought it was only two, but from the data reports from about two or three of the guys that do that sort of thing, found out that four people can share a desk pretty comfortably. That's your in the actually in the UK, and here in the United States it's three. So being able to get data and being able to compare it at the user level with insight, I think that's where the companies are going. And like you were stating before, like with Sony's new management platform on the displays, you might only have two guys now running 1,000 rooms for the enterprise right at the moment, with managing a lot of subcontractors. So data at the per display, better data that we can get at where the users are at, I think is without being intrusive, right? We can't. That's the other thing too, is that data, just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, is also a little bit of a risk right now. So it's got to be actionable, and it's got to provide that you're collecting data not just for data's sake, but I can provide insight with that data and context. Does that make sense?
No, totally. And I think the biggest concern I always have when people talk about that I can collect data, I can collect data, I can collect data is that's great and all, but if there's no insights, there's no actionable outcomes, all you're doing is collecting numbers, right? And
And
John, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna jump in if I can. I mean, because I
yeah,
actually agree with what Eric's saying. I mean, I think not only is data without insight meaningless, but I think we are moving more and more towards collecting or being pushed more and more data sources. And when you've got, I was thinking recently about a hospital I visited, and I went up and I saw they had a 4x4 video wall tracking all the KPIs and important metrics to the hospital's operations, right? Each one of the displays had it subdivided into tracking at least 20 metrics per display. Okay. And those were the KPIs, 20 times 16 screens. It was like ridiculous. I had to walk up, like get my reading glasses out to like read each of the KPIs. And I think we're moving more and more towards wanting to visualize it so that we can create insight, but then also we need relative weighting and value for what it is so that it becomes insightful. And so I think that is a challenge that we're facing.
yeah. But John, there was a great. Oh golly, it was about to just show how many years I've been to Infocom. They brought in the guy that does the NPR show Freakonomics, and he said that for the AV industry, the biggest thing we need right now is dashboards and being able to present that data right out there. That keynote actually caught my attention, going right on. Right, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. The other thing on the data side, which I kind of wanted to maybe get out there and ask some other opinions on it, is that if you collect too much data and just store it, you could be providing a risk right now too. So that's what I
Yeah.
worry about. Everyone just wanting to collect as much data as we can and store it. We got to kind of be
Well,
careful with that a little bit.
yeah, and I think this is where you're starting to see, this balance between where do you use machine learning AI to recognize important pop-up alerts or triggers relative to less important ones, so you can help operators, get their eye on the right thing. But there's also that sensitivity to letting, MLAI loose, into your data pools, into your AV. There's a lot of, I'm seeing a lot of security concerns from the CIOs that I'm speaking to as we're starting to talk about intersection of AV and IT.
I think it also depends on what decision you're trying to make from the data. So if we're talking real estate, am I right size my real estate portfolio? I would say just a few years ago, the technology investment it would take to get actionable data, in some respects, the cost to implement that exceeded the problem it was trying to solve. So now we're getting to a point now, technology has matured to the point where you can get that anonymous data that we know we need to make decisions from. It just recently become, I think, available to us kind of in a mainstream sense. It was kind of cost prohibitive in years past.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, John, you hit something, though, I think is one of the big topics. I don't think this entire year, I don't think did not see a single email at least come through 10 times a day talking about AI.
Yeah.
Everything's been about AI, right? I mean, everybody's been talking about Chat GPT and all the different things. Keith, how much have you seen AI start playing into, the business you guys serve?
Well, I think it's where we see a lot of it, where a lot of it's headed is probably in camera technology. But I think we have to ask ourselves, is that AI or just really, intelligent cameras with well-written software? So some of it's AI, but right now it's really creative software, I think. But where it's ultimately headed, I think, is when we get to these complex environments, it's headed many places, but I'll give kind of one example. So think of a configurable space where you've got multiple cameras and a lot of different variation. We're going to see AI really come into the production rules side, how long to dwell versus how long you switch over to another camera. You're going to see a ton of innovation there because our customers are asking for, I want a room that does it all, but I don't want an operator in the room having to drive it. And so AI is going to play a big role there. And we're seeing the beginnings of that in intelligent camera technology today.
Okay. Eric, what have you seen? Have you seen any other areas that have been expanding AI usage?
Yeah, I want manufacturers to pay me $50 every time I say the word AI.
Well, you don't have to worry about that. We don't talk about that a lot of AI at Sony. Just a little.
Yeah. Now, there was a book that came out pre-pandemic called AI Superpowers. It's probably the best book on AI that I've read until now. And when you're talking about AI, we got to talk. You can get and split hairs on the difference of deep machine learning, right? Or what is truly AI, right? I mean, in a sense, AI is collecting a ton of data in a database and being able to do something with it, right? I mean, if you want to kind of boil it down to really high levels. What we're seeing, it's being used now. It's been being used for a long time. Your audio, the reason why we don't have audio reflecting back to us, most of us aren't on a DSP, is because someone created a machine learning algorithm that could detect human voice. You know what I'm saying? So we've already been using AI, and it's a tool in the tool case, but it isn't an end to be all, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. So it's being able to, instead of, maybe facial recognition, we're going to look at the skeleton instead and look at those points and being able to determine that within the image, right? That's stuff that Sony's been working on, right? And it makes an improvement on what you're doing at the moment, but it's subtle, right? And the rest of the world, it's not like I talked into Chat GPT and it gave me that information back. It was a subtle use of maybe deep machine learning. I argue maybe it's a little more of that. That's making the biggest technology jumps right now versus the AI. I mean, Copilot is nice. Even with Zoom, AI Companion's is nice. But clients for the room side have not been rushing on and adding on that fee as of yet. So I really want to follow what the clients are doing and really want to pay attention to letting them lead the way instead of us making the best tools that nobody wants to buy. Does that make sense? Just adding in AI for the sake of AI could cause us some issues and lead us in the wrong directions. I think we let the client lead us a little bit on that. and see how the tools can be applied to what the clients are willing and stomaching for right now. I mean, we ran into a couple of laws right now in the United States where you can't use some form of camera AI technology in certain states because of this, right? So not with Sony, but with a couple of the other platform vendors are running into some issues right at the moment. So we got to kind of, I'm not saying warning on AI, just understand what AI is instead of this magical thing that's going to fix everything for us or make us more money.
So Keith, I think what's probably one of the biggest interesting things we've heard through this conversation, we've heard in the past too, is traditional Pro AV has changed. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you guys own a Microsoft practice. I mean, that's not traditional Pro AV. This whole conversation we've had forever about AV versus IT, I think it's finally dead. Would you say? Is it really blended now into really one group, or is there still that separation happening?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's largely blended. I think you still have, say on the customer side, on the customer IT side, there are elements of AV they maybe choose not to deal with, when it gets into kind of the art of AV. But in terms of how the technology rides on their network and the requirements therein, it is fully blended and fully integrated now.
Yeah, and would you say you're seeing more conversations around software-based needs versus hardware, or what do you think that balance is now?
I think, from a hardware perspective, a big portion of what we do, collaboration spaces, 5, 10, 15 person, maybe 20-person rooms, just a ton of that going on. And there's been a lot of innovation. We're doing more in a room with less boxes. So call it the systems are becoming more simplified from a cable and hardware perspective, but there's a lot more now on the back end, the software side, is the network healthy for this environment, that type of thing. So we're venturing into the infrastructure more than we have in the past because the technology is kind of driving us there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think John, some of it dovetails in a lot of what you and I have talked about. Is when we look at, especially what Userful is doing, and I'm looking at some of the questions that have been posted, and one of the big questions that came up was the whole HD based T versus SDVOE conversation, and I know a lot of the stuff that Userful is doing, in particular. How do you see this change happening? I mean, in your mind, it's interesting to get your opinion. Then I'm going to get Eric and Keith's coming from the integrator side. It's kind of interesting to see your opinion on this.
Yeah, going back to a little bit of what Keith was saying, I mean, I actually agree with what Keith said about the blend has happened. However, I would say in part, I think that has been a faster paced move in North America. As I move east or I move west, to Asia, or if I move, east over to even Europe, I don't see quite the pace of that adoption that I have seen in North America. But I think it will become globally common. Similarly, I'd say that when I start looking at the AV standards that have historically led the way in standards groups, I think that really all of that, just dissolves, doesn't go away, but dissolves into or becomes absorbed in the context of IT standards. The IT budgets, IT departments are a lot larger and are managing much larger relationships with the Ciscos, the Microsofts, and the like. And ultimately, AV needs to find its place within that ecosystem and blend together. Good example is what happened with Microsoft and Cisco within this last year. Really, I saw a much bigger surge on the communications and collaboration side, with Roombar. Pretty much every environment I'm going into now has a much stronger Cisco, Microsoft footprint for unified comms. But that also then dovetails into how do we collaborate better with dashboards and other operational tools that can be AV oriented. So I just think it's all going to merge, and I don't know if the SDVOE versus is going to be as relevant in a year as it might be within our AV space today.
Eric, what do you think? I know this is a big area you look at quite a bit.
Yeah, by luck, we started having to do like 125 AV over IP matrices since 2007. So we've been in it for a long time. I think everyone made too much of a deal about networking. Networking is networking, and it's a tool in your toolkit. That's all it is, right? I actually see the reverse. I don't see the IT guys making the decisions anymore. It actually reverts back. And it's what's crazy is that C-suite now. So by the time it gets to the IT guys, they've already got a plan in place, and they're having them. And I'm not trying to degrade anyone in the market, and this is just my perception of what I'm dealing with. But they're now implementing what was decided, right? So what I think is interesting right now is that I've been at the AV user groups in a couple of the different meetings, and everyone assumes there's a standard in AV over IP, and there is not. SDOVE is not a standard. It is a group of people working under one platform, right? And broadcasts, we're doing a ton of SMPTE, SMPTE jobs right now. And then you have SMPTE 22 that comes along that offers compression, right? And then they kind of decided on JPEG XS, but they're going to allow other codecs within it. My son is a cybersecurity professional. He just graduated from college maybe about a year ago and works for a power plant right now. When he went through his CCNA, did they ever talk about IGMP, multicasting, and all that? They did not. It's amazing how much we have to go in, right, John, and educate them on IGMP or even on lag and trunking and the different things you have to do there. For me, it's always going to be maybe a segmented network. We get a very kindergarten thing by saying put it on the network. There's core networks. There's, a lot of organizations have a trash network, right, where they put guests are able to go onto it, right? So the thing is that we got to kind of understand that IT is not just this one thing. It is just another tool in our toolkit. And we can't be commoditized because the IT world and raising those professionals up aren't teaching the things that are needed for high speed, low latency video and audio networks, right? So I think our industry kind of needs to understand that, yeah, IT is important. Like you said, I would even take cloud-based computing. Like for us, we do Zoom and Teams all over the place at a very high level. Those are different. But on that cloud, what is interesting, sorry to kind of rant here for a bit, what is interesting is that Microsoft and Zoom has forced more things onto a client network than anything else out there that's been in the past, because it has to be cloud and it has to be to the edge. So it's IT departments are putting a real cost on it, even at the university levels. I'm seeing universities charge $50 a port for AV for an IT connection to the business units now. And now that there's a real cost for it, they're really kind of saying what truly needs to be on our network or not is going to be probably a mixed blend of segmented stuff working in conjunction with others. We've seen a lot of that design this year. And I dare to say, just saying that it's AV and IT, no, AV's got some special needs. You need to understand what's going on in the IT world, but it is not going to be replaced by IT. I can't see anytime soon right now because IT is not training up for the AV needs that's out there right now, if that helps answer the question.
Keith, what do you think?
I think he's right on in that, we find ourselves helping our customers' IT arm architect the network appropriate for multicast traffic and things like that they just don't normally have to deal with. So 100% right on point. But if I have to kind of look into the future, we know what AV over IP is today. Do we have those custom transports 10 years from now, or is it originating straight from the source device? That's where I think things are going to evolve. If we look at what's going on in the meeting room, so many of our customers are saying, "Hey, get that cable off the table." If they need to present, they can do it in Teams. They can do it in Zoom. So that's just kind of the beginnings of it, where the platform, I think, ultimately takes over and creates that user expectation. Now we come in as maybe we're considered somewhat fossils in a way where we want that hard cable to hook into our laptop. Well, it doesn't even have a connection anymore. It's got USB-C, and I have to have all these things to make that work potentially today. But I think in the future, it's just the expectation is the platform does the magic.
Yeah, I think to get to that ubiquitous point you're talking about, that doesn't happen without client demand. The only one that's interesting is SMPTE 2110, 211022, maybe IPMX that's out there right now. The manufacturers wouldn't be motivated to go to the standard unless people are willing to buy it, right? So we got to pay attention to the end user demand on that. And as we go through the pandemic, it's going to be interesting on who drives that conversation. I'm kind of wondering if broadcast is going to drive that back down to the AV industry. It's yet to be determined. I'm not going to make that prediction right now, but that makes it really difficult for manufacturers to work out R&D or get to as a standard, going 10 years down the road right now. And I think that's something to be watchful for next year to see where that lands.
Yeah, I mean, I'd chime in and add to that I think AV becomes, more broadly understood than, core applications that are high quality AV, low latency. I think that we've got, real time, high quality, very, very low latency applications, all the way to near real time, where I just want to view a data metrics dashboard update every, refreshed every 1 to 5 minutes, all the way to content that's AV in nature that's stored at the edge and doesn't even traverse the network. And the protocol that I employ, the architecture, the solution design can go back and forth. And when, as Eric was saying, when the conversation's dialing in, or I'm sorry, when Keith was saying, when we start consulting with the IT department to figure out how to design the architecture of the network correlates with the application type. And I think that's where you just start to see these coming together. They start to understand each other more and more and more. But it starts from the broadening of the number of use cases for AV in the organization. It's more and more visual rules over numbers and words. And I just think that's going to be the maturing over the next year and plus.
Yeah, the last thing I'll add is how much do these influence what the user expects our systems to do?
Yeah, 100% agree, Keith.
The one thing that baffles me though right now is as I'm walking around with users at Infocom, the industry is saying, 4K 444 is important, but are the users saying 4K 444 is important, right? And what I worry about is that, okay, that's the hardest one to make, right? But you know what? There's also areas in between that. There's a lot of areas in between that, right? Yeah. There's, we're talking, we don't need to have, 10 gig pipelines for everything. Maybe 1 gig's good enough, right? And what I worry about, everyone's trying to get to one product or one answer on that, where I think it's good to have a diverse amount of solutions in your toolbox at different price points, right? And I think that's what we see with the cell phone, right? For example, or, if I'm putting up in the command and control environment, right, John, if I'm putting up Google Earth up here, does it need a refresh 60 seconds?
No.
So there might be ways to allow more people with a lower barrier entry to get into this and utilize these technologies, as long as we keep a couple tools in our toolbox instead of saying there's only one tool in our toolbox.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Eric.
Yep.
So thinking a bit more about what we saw this past year, one thing that I thought became even, I think, more important, and we saw such a huge rise on this, was the focus on sustainability and the message that we had out there. And you saw it, everything ranging from organizations like SAVE, who started to become stronger in prominence. You're seeing, I'm even starting to see stuff on RFPs coming from customers asking us about sustainability message. And I think we even saw it at the shows. We saw it at Infocom, we saw it at ISE, more and more of a drive around this. What do you think the big challenges that are ahead of us? Do you think we're really doing it? Do you think the industry is attacking this the right way, or is it just more of a marketing ploy right now? And do you not see manufacturers and others really attacking this the right way? What are your guys' thoughts? Eric, maybe get your thoughts first. I know you bounce around a lot with a lot of the international events that are going on, and I know in Europe it's important in Europe, a lot more important than it is in the U.S., but it's growing.
Yeah, Europe was really on the forefront on it. Europe's very concerned about it. United States actually kind of let up a little bit this year, is what we saw. But what's nice are the global companies, the global footprints are trying to create an equilibrium across the board. Yeah, we want to do it. The biggest one, I think, is actually, I think companies are planning better, at our level, or what affects us the most is the life cycle of refreshes. Does that make sense? Or our plan on how we're going to e-waste the product to make sure it's done. So I think you are seeing a little bit more on, we're going to put this in, what's going to we're going to use it, and what's going to happen to it afterwards, right? And I think that affected the clients a little bit. We've had a lot more conversations about that. They wanted to see how we e-waste, or what's our plan on removing it. We actually had a couple clients pay us to remove gear this year and take care of that for it. So that was kind of a new market, or something that hadn't been out there in the past. I think the other thing too is that going to are some of the challenges when you're using new tool sets like AV over IP, for example. I have one device that's PoE plus, right? Or PoE plus plus, right? And the problem is that, well, everyone's putting in the switch that has all that power into it, right? Does that make sense? So the problem is that maybe are we overbuilding for it, or what happens when we're using 90 watt power, 100 watt power? So there's been some things around that, or looking that maybe as we go down this road on the the lead's still important, but it doesn't seem to be as important as, hey, do me a favor, we want to consider this into the design. Mm-hmm. But it may not be driving the design as much in the past. Sorry to be negative on that one. Europe's totally the other way around.
Yeah, and I think, Keith, I know one of the big things with you guys, with what you guys have done with Velocity, is a big piece of that sustainability message. I mean, what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, so it kind of touches on what Eric was hitting on with, recycling of equipment, if you will. If you look at the way we have Velocity structured, it's a month-to-month cancel anytime subscription for, say, a room solution, a collaboration room solution. Customers are actually looking at that as a green initiative because they use the technology for the time that they need it. They have no opportunity to purchase, nor do they want to. When they're done, they're done. We come and take the technology back, and we will redeploy to another customer. Now, so if you think about that, customers may choose to refresh because this particular piece of technology can't do every single feature Teams has released or Zoom has released. But for another user, it's perfectly fine. So we keep that technology in circulation based on kind of user demand. Our industry has been terrible about that in the past because there's just always new stuff coming out, and we tend to throw away the old and bring in the new. So being able to keep this technology in circulation, even well past 3 years on into 5 years, by today's standards, 5 years is a long, long time. Our Velocity offer allows that to happen.
Okay.
I'd chime in that, in my view, AV virtualization equals sustainability. And if I go back to, when I was starting at Userful in 2018, I was watching company after company deploy a server for each AV room in which a solution at a given enterprise needed some solution type, such that customer might end up with a server or a box per room across 20 rooms, 20 AV solutions. And I think with that trend enabling IT more and networks more, even AV networks more, we're able to virtualize to create one stronger, more powerful platform for the organization that eliminates architectural wastage or point solution wastage all around the enterprise campus. We're working with a large manufacturer with 33 factories around North America, one server powering all of them from a centralized data center. and that creates a lot of savings on many fronts. And I think that as we move towards getting the class of compute, I mean GPU and CPU, and when, as was discussed earlier, the standards are driving better codecs, right? We get more efficiency, in creating less loss in the technology, whether it be the advent of ML or AI. Like when all of this is advancing, we can create better architectural solutions. And I think that the leading integrators are envisioning that and working with the leading technology providers to get there. And then you get that sustainability coming through that.
Well,
As
and
a
I
joke,
think, oh, go ahead,
go ahead.
Eric.
I was going to say, as a joke to Sony though, we were at the same time complaining that our monitors got broken and are destroyed from the shipping company as they come in, right? So it's like if you don't have the box sturdy enough that you got to get rid of that waste at the same time, right? That's got to be a nightmare for you guys. And I know you guys are working towards innovation there as well, which might, the packing contents and getting smarter on that.
Yep.
That everyone's trying to do right now is actually, it might be swaying some people's mind on what products are getting right now. That's how crazy it is.
Yeah, like right now it's like almost a 50-50 shot as to whether or not it's going to show up undamaged.
Yeah, now you can't prevent a forklift from going through it, but
yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest challenge, right? I think we've all done a really good job of building them sturdier and sturdier, but at the same time, you've got, I think, forklifts put a big bullseye on the side of every display. The bigger the display, the bigger the bullseye they want to hit, right? And,
yeah, but reduce your packaging, Rich. I mean,
I know. It's crazy, right? One of the other things, it's kind of a part of a sustainability conversation, and obviously, Sony, we've invested a lot into this, are tools, right? And we look at tools like you heard us talk about device management platform and a lot of these remote tools. I mean, what are you seeing from a perspective of A, interest in the market? Are your customers asking for this stuff? And B, how do you see that changing how you work forward with your customers? Keith, I know you've been quite a bit involved with us on the DMP side. I mean, what are you seeing?
Oh, there's absolute demand. Being able to manage. There's a couple of legs to that. So we think about large deployments. How do we eliminate as many touches as possible to get that device up online doing what we want it to do? So how can we minimize the steps to call it first birthday? And then once everything is deployed in theater, how do we manage all those devices? And customers are definitely investing in that for sure. And then bringing that into management tools like ServiceNow. ServiceNow is kind of one out, I would say, so to speak, in your technology management platform and your service management platform. So how can we take device management, bring it into ServiceNow, and have full integration?
And I know, John, that's been part of what we've talked to, is just the tools, right? The software tools to allow better support, better resources to your customers. What are you seeing in a lot of the focus that you're doing as an organization? How are you guys trying to transform?
Well, going back to that message I talked earlier about, distributed operations, centralized management. I mean, I just see that like accelerating faster and faster and faster. But the challenge is actually larger than is imaginable, right? Because you need to manage the source, and source ingest to make sure that stays quality. You need to make sure that, where you're managing your content, aggregating it, all of that is running fluidly. Your distribution across a network or matrix switch infrastructure is manageable. And then the endpoint. The key theme, one of the very first words I hear whenever I'm talking about this topic is security. More and more we're hearing about concerns around cybersecurity, and naturally the endpoint, the DMP, the player at the edge is a point of vulnerability. So making sure that that's secure and remotely manageable, that ties into that. It's far away, but how do I make sure I can lock it down or disassociate it or take it off the network, whatever I need to do. So that security theme is front and center, at the same time that everyone's worried about making sure that it's manageable and providing high quality service. So you do all of that, and I think this is a very, very important theme for the next year, 2024.
Yeah, and I'll add a little more, kind of my perspective. So in the past, we had a player separate from the display. Now that SoC has come to the point, it's got the performance we need it to have, bringing that DMP together with SoC, we now have greater confidence, that what we intend to be displayed is being displayed without having to, communicate between player and display.
And I'll highlight, Rich, as you know, Userful and Sony have just announced that very solution, software player that runs on that Sony SoC. And I will say that when that solution is presented into an enterprise AV organization, IT organization, whatever it may be, they regard that as a secure, safe endpoint. There's another security layer that people don't really recognize as central there. It's advantageous, as Keith was saying.
So let's kind of change it a little bit. We've kind of been pretty tech heavy through this conversation, and it's been great, and I appreciate it and love all the feedback from all of you guys. Let's talk about this last year a little bit more. This last year was truly our first real full year away from COVID for events. What did you guys think? Do you think that the events came back the way that they were before COVID? Or do you think there's still a long ways to go? And do you think it's the large events versus small regional events? I mean, what are you seeing really impacting your business the right way? And I think each of you either speak at, attend, or host your own events. So it'd kind of be good to kind of get all of your feedback. Eric, I'll start with you because I know you like me, we attend a lot of different types of events as well. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, we have a little different strategy. The events this year were fantastic. Our strategy is we want to go InfoComm, for example. I'm not, if you hear me, I'm not here telling you this is going to be the future in the next year, at least past 3 years, because that kind of thinking is not, you're going to make the best product that no one wants to buy doing that. What I like to do is go, these are the best technologies that are available in the market, and then watch what clients and end users are doing at those events and seeing how they're reacting to it and seeing how it applies to them. I think Avixia was back 100% for InfoComm this year on that. So even if the attendance is down, the end user participation seemed much higher. Seeing groups like KETMA come into the organization, and even though they have their viewpoints, it's still important to see what products they're getting made. I think sometimes us as experts sitting here in the layer in between our clients and the manufacturer can really distort things at times. So what I like seeing is, hey, we're not smarter than the market. Let's see what the market's saying at these big shows where there's a wide variance, right? I'm actually also in favor at these big events to put vaporware out there, because I think putting vaporware out there or showing something that we're thinking about making and getting more and more input is better for the industry overall than everyone sitting here going, this is going to be the next big thing that you're going to buy, right? I just see so many mistakes being made that way. So I think InfoComm was great this year for it. ISE was phenomenal for it. ISE was really large. And then the smaller trade shows are great if you can get the clients to come to them. That's where I see maybe on the regionals, they're used for something else. I think they're used more for training, more for alerting everyone who can't get to the bigger shows on what happens, right? So I think each one of them has their place, but allow that event that's useful for what it's trying to do, allow that to happen and don't fight it. I saw a lot of people at InfoComm that were mad that there were so many end users there, and I go, no, this is fantastic.
I want to. That's why we all are there. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think we're all there to see those end users and engage with them. But
absolutely, yeah. And then anyone who's kind of thinking differently on that, I get that. I know that we pay a lot of money to make this happen. But what better place can you talk with someone about all the different technologies under one roof, right? And it always shocks me. I always think they're going to go for this, and they go for that.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. John, what do you think?
I think we've seen just mixed results. I mean, my jury's still out. I've been to some fabulous large events. I've been to some fabulous mid-size, events, and I've been to some fabulous smaller events. But I've also been to some doozies, that we just said to ourselves, what's going on with that event? There were no end users, no partners showing alike. So, I still feel like it's hit and miss, and that, coming off of COVID, things were very hit miss, and then they seem to be coming back. Part of me feels a little bit that we're all feeling the effects of the economy, and we're all, looking at our budget, saying, how much do we invest in a booth? How much do we invest in a presence? End user, do I go to this show, or do I skip this year and go every other? I can't make heads or tails of it, so I yield to Keith.
Well, Keith's got the unique thing because they have they do these really large events all over the U.S. as well. So,
yeah, absolutely, and I think they have visibility to the whole world. So I yield to Keith.
Yeah, we've had good success with our live events, and where we see a lot of value for the end user is the ability for them to kind of kick the tires, so to speak, on a true integrated system. Not just staring at, this box or that box, but actually give them the ability to kind of see what a system in the wild is. So when we say something like Microsoft Teams Room, we take for granted that our customers know what that means. They know what Microsoft Teams is, but a Teams Room is a completely different experience.
Yeah.
So, I'm constantly blown away when I'm working with a customer and they see that touch interface and they go, oh, that's what that is. Oh, it's like the first time they've ever seen it. And then, kind of the realm of the possible conversations start to come out with different technologies that, are purpose built for different applications around that platform. Same thing with Zoom, same thing with Google. Talking about broadcast applications, also esports. Esports kind of has another renaissance of sorts, right? It's been something we've talked about for a while, but nobody could really put their finger on what it meant for maybe a higher education institution. We're starting to actually see that level off, and we know what it is now. We know what that thing is. So bringing those experiences to the customers in these live events have been very powerful for us. Beyond that, also investing heavily in experience centers nationally and globally. So if you can't make it to one of our regional shows, any one of our offices, you can get in there and again, start to understand these technologies.
So coming up towards the end of this great conversation, I hate these to end, but this has been a fantastic conversation. I got one last question for each one of you. And this is really, I want you to look a little bit back this last year. What's a piece of technology that you saw a manufacturer come out, hopefully none of my competitors, that you came out and you said was game changing or really changed something, changed your business or changed how customers are going to deploy technology? Keith, I'm going to start with you first, put you on the spot first. What have you seen out there?
Mine's easy, and it's a Sony thing. Your non-glare displays, believe it or not, is as insignificant as that may seem. Our industry has battled with glare in meeting spaces because so much of what we do is a high ambient light, a lot of windows type, collaboration space. Those displays are really well timed.
Okay. John?
I saw a lot of progress with higher resolution controllers for LED walls. I saw an announcement of, an 8K capable controller. I see the market adopting more and more 4K controllers, and I just look at the ability to do more and more with an LED canvas is becoming very, very powerful, and having controller technology that allows for you to ingest, high resolution content and put it up there. I think that's going to create for some economies that accelerate LED even faster.
Okay. Eric?
Actually, 3, and you guys incorporated one of them really well, and the second one, you just hit the market. I actually think flip chip, and no one really paying attention to what you can do with the flip chip on the direct view LED side. It's actually kind of in some instances, lowering the cost and providing a way and a method for that technology to come out there. To nothing out on the market is going to compete with that. I mean, it's even better than what I've seen in plasma. But if, like I said, back to the shows, if the client doesn't see it, and it's hard to demo that in person, they don't get it, right? So with these new technologies at the shows, everyone was talking about flip chip, but until you saw them, everyone at the show then went, oh, that's the reason why we want to use the Sony Crystal product, right? And so that was important. And then also, I think what you guys, with Sony and the advance of what we're starting to do with the AI on the camera, is getting a lot better. It's amazing there's a basic Qualcomm chip out there that can do basic AI that's in a ton of cameras, but you guys were able to implement it at that same kind of price point with a lot of your technology and a lot of investment you guys have already done. So as we move forward too, with the advancements on finding better algorithms and finding better abilities to track people for that, I think that right there is from the client's perspective, believe it or not, a subtle change on the new AI cameras that were just released last month from you guys. It actually blew a couple of our clients away, and that should, especially at those price points, moving into 2024.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys spending some time with us today. I know you're all very busy, and I appreciate the partnership and friendship you've had with Sony for a long time. We've got, just for those on here, please, if you got other questions, we will follow up with them and come back with lots of answers. Do want to just lay a couple things out there. We do have some road shows coming up. Kansas City, the end of January. A very large event coming up in San Diego in early February, the 6th and 7th. We'll also be sponsoring Save's event in March. And I know we'll be coming up with the next Tech Tuesday. We'll be focusing on unveiling new AI for impactful video presentations. So a lot coming out there from Sony. So once again, I want to thank Eric, Keith, and John for your partnership and spending time with us here at Sony. And everyone else, have a great day. Thank you.